Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. International watchdog Human Rights Watch says India has intensified its unwarranted restraints on the rights to free speech, access to information, healthcare and education in occupied Kashmir. It said New Delhi's claims of improving Kashmiris' lives ring hollow 1 year after the revocation of the occupied valley's constitutional status. Meanwhile, Indian authorities have intensified a curfew in Srinagar district amid planned protests by the locals to observe August 5 as Black Day. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan has played an important role in diffusing tensions between arch foes Saudi Arabia and Iran. In an interview, Khan said Pakistan prevented a military confrontation between the two regional powers. The Prime Minister said Islamabad's mediation between Tehran and Riyadh has not stopped and is making slow but meaningful progress. Israel has struck multiple Syrian military targets. The Defense Ministry says the raids were in retaliation for an earlier attempted IED attack near the security fence between Syria and Israel. No casualties have been reported so far. The Pakistan Cricket Board has named 16 players for the opening test match against England at Old Trafford on Wednesday. Azhar Ali will lead Pakistan's side that also includes former captain Sarfraz Ahmed. The headlines and the detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Pakistan says India has failed to break the spirits of Kashmiris despite its oppression, arrests, brutalities, year-long lockdown and communication blackout. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Kashmiris have completely rejected Indian actions of August the 5th last year. Speaking at an all-parties conference in connection with 1-year anniversary of India's illegal annexation and clampdown in Kashmir, Qureshi said, with its actions in the valley, the Indian government has exposed its true fascist and extremist face. He said India is trying to change the demography of occupied valley through the controversial domicile law. Qureshi said the entire world is criticizing the Indian government's policies of hatred and discrimination. He assured Pakistan will continue supporting the just struggle of Kashmiris until the realization of their right to self-determination. International watchdog Human Rights Watch says India has intensified its unwarranted restraints on the rights to free speech, access to information, healthcare and education in the occupied Kashmir. It said New Delhi's claims of improving Kashmiri lives ring hollow 1 year after the revocation of occupied valley's constitutional status. The HRW said several new arrests have been made and torture and ill-treatment of innocent Kashmiris by occupying forces continues. The Rights Watch said New Delhi's curfew has affected livelihoods dependent on tourism and agriculture. The communication blackout has hampered students' access to online classes and doctors' access to new research. HRW has urged New Delhi to stop violating Kashmiris' rights, release the detainees and hold officials responsible for rights violations. The Indian authorities have intensified a curfew in the Srinagar district of occupied Kashmir amid planned protests by the locals to observe August the 5th as Black Day. The day marks 1 year when India illegally revoked the special status of the valley.
There will be complete restrictions of movement of the public within the territorial limits of the district. Most of the roads and marketplaces have already been sealed, while announcements are being made on loudspeakers asking people to stay indoors. The curbs came into force with immediate effect and will remain in force on the 4th and 5th of August. The Indian authorities had already imposed strict restrictions in the occupied Kashmir, which were increased on Eid al-Adha. Indian troops, paramilitary forces and police personnel have been deployed in strength at several places in the valley to enforce the siege.
Indian occupation forces martyred 214 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked Article 370 and stripped the region of its autonomy in August last year. Occupied Kashmir has been under a strict curfew and communication blackout since then. The report revealed that nearly 1,400 people were critically injured due to the use of force by Indian troops in the valley. It said most of the victims were killed in fake encounters during cordon and search operations. It added the troops damaged over 946 houses and disgraced 84 women. The occupation forces arrested 13,680 and half a dozen girls during the period. For more on this, we are joined by Gohar Gilani, who is a Srinagar-based journalist. Gohar, thank you for your time at Indus News. What has been the effect of New Delhi's 5th of August actions on how Kashmiris actually see India now?
What has changed in the last 1 year, I would just point out that in terms of politics, there is the complete absence of politics on the ground. I mean, earlier it used to be the case that the, anti-India forces or pro-freedom, pro-independence or pro-Pakistan forces would observe certain days as black days. It's for the first time that the pro-India forces, who are referred to as the mainstream or unionist politics, politicians, those parties are observing August 5 as Black Day. So this is a significant shift that now the pro-India parties in Kashmir are observing August 5 day as Black Day. Second is that there has been complete, abdication of leadership from both ideological camps, whether be it the unionists or the pro-independence groups. Such has been the intensity of the crackdown. Third is, how the media has been gagged during the last 1 year in particular, while there are cases against 6 prominent journalists under draconian laws, and more than 32 journalists have been summoned and questioned. As far as the economy, because entire thing, the status quo was altered on the plank of development. So what the development scenario is that Kashmir economy alone has lost 40,000 crores, while according to the Chamber of Commerce, 4 lakh youths have lost their jobs in the last 1 year. So on the ground, 4th of August and 5th of August it's entire curfew in the entire valley. So it's not only in Srinagar, but the curfew has been imposed in the entire Kashmir valley. So that is what has changed in the last year. There's, the facts on the ground have completely changed. Civil liberties have been suspended. Media has been gagged. Economy is in tatters, and there is a complete absence of, politics and total uncertainty in the region.
So, Gohar, Kashmiris have been under Indian lockdown and communication blackout for a year now. There are reports of further crackdown and arrests in the occupied valley ahead of 5th of August. What is the on-ground situation in the valley right now?
See, this pattern of arresting people ahead of certain days is nothing new in Kashmir. Earlier it used to be the case that on the eve of India's Independence Day or India's Republic Day on 26th of January, 15th of August, Independence Day, and then on 27th of October when the Indian armed forces landed in Kashmir, when they were airlifted to Srinagar. So on those occasions, mostly the pro-independence voices and those civil society actors would be taken into prison, or what they refer to as preventive detention. But now the scenario has changed, that now even the pro-India politicians are in jail, and most of them who have been released, they continue to be placed under house arrest, and there are there's a strict watch over them. There's surveillances like akin to George Orwellian concept of the big brother is watching you, where the state has so much control over your lives that even when they speak to the media or try to speak to the media, there are so much of curbs, and then they are like, as I said, the surveillance is so high, and this continues. Some people have been released, but they continue to remain under house arrest, and there is apprehension that some people might also be taken under preventive arrest ahead of the August 5 decision. So right now, what I can tell you from the ground is the streets are deserted, and there's constant fear in the minds of people. But at the same time, I want to just bring another point, is that people there, I have spoken to a lot of people in the civil society and also common people. There's also some anger against Pakistan, if I may, because people think that what happened in Kashmir on August 5 was a huge geopolitical event, because the status quo was altered of a disputed territory where there are other external stakeholders, and only tweets, eye-catching tweets, or just the role played by Pakistan as if it were an NGO to spread awareness. That is not enough. So people are also expressing their frustration, thinking that when such big countries like China, they can't bring India on the negotiating table, how can a dispossessed population, which is little over 10 million, without any infrastructure, without any resources, can withstand such pressures from the state?
Gaur Gilani, thank you very much for your time at Indus News, for updating us regarding the current situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir, a Srinagar-based journalist. Now we'll talk to former Ambassador Asif Durrani about the latest situation in occupied Kashmir. What have Pakistan's diplomatic efforts, Mr. Durrani, achieved over the past 1 year of India's illegal annexation and inhuman clampdown of the occupied valley?
When you talk about Pakistan's achievements, Pakistan has been able to further highlight the duplicity of the Indian state towards the Kashmiri people. While the pretext has been to have development for the Kashmiris, in fact, Kashmiris have gone down further economically and on socio-political context. If you talk about, then even pro-Kashmiri politicians, they have been put behind bars, they have been put under house arrest. So what kind of socio-political development or economic development Mr. Modi's government has been talking about? So Pakistan has been able to project that as well at the international fora. And you might have observed that Security Council had 2 informal sessions. Although when you talk about from political point of view, it may not have that value as a full-fledged session of the UN Security Council has it, or for that matter, some outcome from the Security Council, either through a presidential statement or through a Security Council resolution. That did not come by, but that was quite obvious because 1 or 2 odd permanent members of the Security Council, they opposed a formal session of the UN Security Council.
So, Mr. Durrani, what has been the diplomatic cost for India because of its violation of UN resolutions in particular?
I think it's a substantive cost for India. For the first time, even sober analysts and Western media, they have questioned the credentials of Indian democracy. They have questioned the motives of India as a state, which is being led by the extremist Hindu mind, and they are in fact riding on the waves of majoritism. This has caused problems when you talk about India's domestic politics. So in that context, minorities are at the receiving end, particularly the Muslims. There is a fierce psychosis in the country. The majority, they lynched the minority, especially Muslims, and you might have seen the images throughout. And this has been noticed by the world. And in Kashmir, this has been so much internationalized that during the past 7 decades, this is the first time, and this is Modi's government, that the dispute has been internationalized, especially by the media. Earlier, the Western media were shy in discussing the Kashmir dispute. Now, in fact, it is the media which projected Modi's repressive actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir so much that Indians actually, they became unnerved. And this is what would be, in fact, would force the Modi government to see the reason. Otherwise, I think they will have a really a tough time ahead, both politically as well as otherwise. You can say that there are countries, for instance, Turkey and Iran and Malaysia, they came up so openly in opposing Indian actions in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir state. Yes.
Mr. Asif Durrani, former ambassador, thank you for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan has played an important role in diffusing tensions between arch foes Saudi Arabia and Iran. In an interview, Khan said Pakistan prevented a military confrontation between the two regional powers. He said the confrontation could have been the worst possible scenario for the Middle East. The Prime Minister said Islamabad's mediation between Tehran and Riyadh has not stopped and is making slow but meaningful progress. Talking about Indian atrocities in the occupied Kashmir, Khan said the revocation of Article 370 last year turned the region into an open-air prison. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan has played an important role in diffusing tensions between arch foes Saudi Arabia and Iran. In an interview, Khan said Pakistan prevented a military confrontation between the two regional powers. He said the confrontation could have been the worst possible scenario for the Middle East. The Prime Minister said Islamabad's mediation between Tehran and Riyadh has not stopped and is making slow but meaningful progress. Talking about Indian atrocities in the occupied Kashmir, Khan said the revocation of Article 370 last year turned the region into an open-air prison. He said within a year, India has destroyed the economy of the valley with its year-long curfew and communication blackout. He also accused Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi of undermining the country's legacy of secularism. The Taliban say the release of remaining prisoners of the group is essential for commencement of intra-Afghan negotiations. The group's spokesperson said Deputy Leader Mullah Baradar Akhund discussed the inception of talks with the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in a video call. He said Pompeo welcomed the three-day Eid ceasefire by the Taliban. The intra-Afghan negotiations are set to begin as Kabul and the Taliban have released almost all of each other's prisoners. Israel has struck multiple Syrian military targets. The Defense Ministry says the raids were in retaliation for an earlier attempted IED attack near the security fence between Syria and Israel. No casualties have been reported so far. Israel's army said its fighter jets, attack helicopters and other warplanes struck observation posts and intelligence collection systems. Earlier, Syria state media said Israel's helicopters rocketed army positions near Quneitra in the south, but caused only material damage. It also said Syrian air defenses thwarted raids near Damascus. There was no comment from Syria on the fence incident. Dozens of protesters in Austria have denounced Israel's illegal actions against Palestinians. Slamming Israel's plan to annex settlement blocks in the West Bank, protesters stressed the importance of a two-state solution. The demonstrators outside the US Embassy in Vienna criticized Washington's support for Tel Aviv. The protesters chanted no to the occupation of Palestinian lands, and Austria should not support Israel and US imperialism. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his annexation plan is not off the table yet. In a party meeting, Netanyahu said the matter of annexation resides with the US. Turkey has denounced a recent statement by Bahrain which criticized remarks made by Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar. Turkey's Defense Ministry said the statement by Bahrain's Foreign Ministry does not reflect the truth. Earlier on Friday, Akar said the United Arab Emirates has committed malicious acts in Syria and Libya. He warned Abu Dhabi will be held accountable at the right place and time. Responding, Bahrain's Foreign Ministry described Akar's statement as hostile and an unacceptable provocation. Turkish Defense Ministry said UAE has made efforts to keep Ankara away from the Arab world. It said Arab people are our friends and brothers. Latin America, the world's hardest hit region by COVID-19, has crossed 5 million cases with over 200,000 deaths. This comes as Brazil records 561 deaths and over 16,000 cases in the last 24 hours. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 18.1 million, with the death tally exceeding 691,000. What in this report?
Thousands of deaths and hundreds of thousands of new COVID-19 cases continue to devastate the Americas. Brazil remains the virus hotspot with the world's second highest infection rate and death toll. Despite surging amount of cases, President Donald Trump has echoed Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan's take on permanent lockdowns.
It's important for all Americans to recognize that a permanent lockdown is not a viable path toward producing the result that you want, or certainly not a viable path forward, and would ultimately inflict more harm than it would prevent.
In Europe, the once worst-hit Italy's spike in daily cases appears to have slowed down, but Germany has confirmed an increase in cases, reporting 800 infections overnight. Struggling to contain the spread, Australia's Victoria state has announced a fine for anyone breaching the COVID-19 related rules.
You will be door-knocked, you will be visited. If you're not at home, then you will be fined. And the fine, $1,652, but beyond that, the opportunity for police to on-the-spot fine you up to $5,000, and for particularly selfish behaviour, the opportunity to take you to court, where the maximum penalty is in fact $20,000.
In Asia, mainland China has reported a decline in cases, while Hong Kong has reported 78 infections overnight for the first time in almost 2 weeks. South Korea continues to battle the virus with important and locally transmitted cases being reported every day.
India's total number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 1.85 million after over 52,000 infections were reported in the past day. The Health Ministry said 803 people died in the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll to more than 38,000. Health officials said over 1.23 million patients have recovered so far. This is the percentage of patients tested positive for coronavirus stood at 7.86% in the country. Meanwhile, Iran has recorded 212 more fatalities from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, bringing the nationwide death toll to over 17,600. The Health Ministry said over 2,700 people have been tested positive, raising the total to over 314,000. The coronavirus pandemic is in a steady decline in Pakistan, with the country reporting 15 deaths and 432 new cases in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said the country's death toll stands at 5,999. The ministry said out of over 280,000 cases detected so far, more than 249,000 have recovered from the virus. It said there are now over 25,000 active cases in the country, with 1,013 in critical condition. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 121,000 infections, while Punjab has over 93,000. In the northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, there are over 34,000 cases, while Balochistan recorded over 11,000 cases. The United Nations says North Korea is continuing with its nuclear weapons program. A UN's confidential report seen by Reuters says Pyongyang's past 6 nuclear tests have likely helped it to develop miniaturized nuclear devices. In 2018, North Korea blew up tunnels at its main nuclear test site, saying it was proof of its commitment to end testing. The report says only tunnel entrances are known to have been destroyed without comprehensive demolition. It said North Korea can rebuild any and reinstall infrastructure needed to support a nuclear test within 3 months. North Korea's mission to the UN has not responded to the claim yet. The death toll from the toxic liquor incident in India's northern Punjab state has risen to 108. In a statement, the Punjab government said so far the counterfeit liquor has claimed lives in 3 districts, with 82 in Tarn. The statement said 13 people died in each Amritsar and Batala districts. After the incident, the local police have arrested 37 people in a massive crackdown. Officials in Punjab said they suspect denatured spirit, which is usually used in the paint and hardware industry, was used in the seized material. Punjab's Chief Minister Amrinder Singh has ordered an inquiry into the incident. US President Donald Trump says Washington should get a cut from the sale of TikTok's US unit in an American firm buys it. The US President put forward the demand in a phone call with the tech firm Microsoft's boss Satya Nadella at the weekend. He also warned he will ban the app on the 15th of September if there is no deal. The app is owned by China's ByteDance, which is under to sell its U.S. business after Trump threatened a crackdown on Chinese companies.
Directly.
It would come from the sale, yeah. Whatever the number is, it would come.
Directly.
It would come from the sale, yeah. Whatever the number is, it would come from the sale.
And then you
Which
mentioned
nobody else would be thinking about but me. But that's the way I think, and I think it's very fair.
and you
But
mentioned
we want no security problems with China. It's got to be an American company. It's got to be American security. It's got to be owned here. We don't want to have any problems with security, etc. And something could come out. I will tell you, there's a lot of excitement, not only by Microsoft, but by other companies in terms of buying it. So we'll see what happens. But we want, and we think we deserve to have a big percentage of that price coming to America, coming to the Treasury.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he is suing Nevada's Governor Steve Sisolak for passing a bill to allow mail-in ballots. In a tweet, the Democrat governor is using the pandemic for political gains. The president has strongly opposed the mail-in voting for the November election. He said mail-in ballots will lead to fraud and compromise the transparency of the election. While Democrats argue that the postal voting is safer amid the coronavirus pandemic in the country. Hurricane Isaias has made landfall into the Carolinas with the risks of life-threatening storm surge, flooding, rainfall and tornadoes. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said the hurricane landed near Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina. The agency said the storm packed maximum sustained winds of about 137 kilometers per hour of the North Carolina coast. Authorities have issued hurricane warnings for a portion of upper South Carolina and lower North Carolina coasts of Myrtle Beach and Wilmington. Oak Island in North Carolina and South's Garden City Beach reported damaged houses and downed trees from a possible tornado. Authorities say the storm will sweep quickly towards northeast on Wednesday and extended warning all the way up to May. French pharmaceutical giant Sanofi is being investigated for manslaughter. Health authorities have accused the firm of not revealing the risks its epilepsy drug Depakine poses to pregnant women. Health authorities said when mothers-to-be took the drug, they increased the chances of their children having birth defects, autism, and learning difficulties. The investigation will determine whether the pharmaceutical company can be held responsible for the death of 4 babies born between 1990 and 2014. Earlier, a district court ordered Sanofi doctors and state to pay thousands of euros as compensation to families affected by their irresponsible behavior. Sanofi has denied all the allegations and claimed it informed people about the side effects of the Depakine. The death toll after days of heavy rain and floods in South Korea has risen to 13. Authorities said the total number of missing persons stands at 13, while over 1,000 people remain displaced. Disaster management officials said landslides and swept away vehicles were the causes of most of the deaths. Officials said floods swamped over 57 square kilometers of farmland and drowned parts of key highways and bridges in Seoul. Earlier, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in urged national and the regional authorities to make all-out efforts to prevent further loss of life. Meanwhile, neighboring North Korea state media warned of possible flooding, saying that some areas were also experiencing heavy rainfall. Syrian refugees are working with experts to grow vertical gardens using old mattresses in Zatari refugee camp. The area around the camp is dotting the landscape with lush green vegetation. More in this report.
In the sprawling desert premises of the Zatari refugee camp, small oases of greenery are now dotting the landscape. Plants and herbs like mint, tomatoes, and cucumbers are thriving despite the infertile land. Thanks to 2 simple elements, water and some old mattresses, refugees are using hydroponic farming to grow vertical gardens.
The project has several goals and positive outcomes to begin with. It allows us to become self-sufficient, and it also saves water. And this agricultural project can be implemented in crowded and small spaces. It's all 100% natural and pure, without chemicals or hormones, so the fruits and vegetables we produce are 100% healthy.
UN experts say the hydroponic system consumes 70 to 80% less water than traditional methods and is especially useful for water-stricken countries. Ahmad Zubi, who lives in the camp with his wife and 6 kids, said he was happy to return to his old career as a farmer.
I love working on this project because I enjoy farming. Spending time among the plants and working with vegetables is different than working in construction. So I enjoy this, especially since the process is technologically advanced and the process is clean. Traditional agriculture is full of mud and sand. This is just water. We come clean and we leave clean.
The Zatari camp is home to nearly 76,000 Syrian refugees, over 40,000 of whom are children. Hundreds of refugees have started their own small gardens after being trained on the hydroponic system.
Climate change remains the most pressing issue of today's time, yet the world continues to falter when it comes to tackling the problem. Amid concerns about the environment, scientists have found that the carbon dioxide emissions are still on the rise. More in this report.
Earth's atmosphere is even more sensitive to carbon dioxide emissions than was earlier thought. A World Climate Research Program study has found that the doubling of carbon dioxide could lead global temperatures to rise by 2.6 to 4.1 degrees Celsius. This puts the lowest rise more than 1 degree above scientists' previously estimated range of 1.5 to 4.5 degrees Celsius. Co-author of the study, Zeki Housefather, a climate scientist, says the study offers a better sense of exactly how much the Earth will warm up as carbon dioxide emission rises.
So the study is a big 4-year-long assessment of how sensitive the Earth's climate is to increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And what we mean by sensitive is essentially if we double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, exactly how much will the Earth warm? And to put it in perspective, we're on track to double CO2 at our current rate of emissions by around 2080 or so.
The study relies on computer simulations using satellite observations, historic temperature records, and evidence of prehistoric temperatures from tree rings. Climate scientist Andrew Dressler says, if we do not rapidly ratchet down emissions, there is going to be a lot of suffering.
COVID-19 is not going to solve climate change. And in fact, the lesson of COVID-19 is that you cannot solve climate change by simply telling people to consume less. What you need to do to solve climate change is to switch our energy sources. And that is not going to happen on its own.
The severe effects of global warming are expected from a rise beyond 2 degrees Celsius. Already, the average global temperature has risen by about 1.2 degrees Celsius.
Britain's Duchess of Sussex and wife of Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, is celebrating her 39th birthday today. The former US actress married Prince Harry in May 2018 in a glittering ceremony at the Windsor Castle. The Duchess of Sussex welcomed her first child, Archie, the following May. But the couple has since shared a fraught relationship with the UK media. In January, Harry and Meghan stepped away from their position as senior royals, citing false and invasive media coverage as a major factor. Prior to marrying Prince Harry, Meghan was best known for her role in the US TV legal drama Suits. European stocks are trading lower after British Petroleum, Bayer and Diageo reported net losses in the second quarter. In the opening session, markets were trading mixed after strong manufacturing data from the US boosted investor sentiment, while stocks in the Asia-Pacific broadly advanced overnight. Investors continue to monitor US fiscal stimulus talks as lawmakers work towards a new coronavirus relief bill. In early trading, the pan-European stock 600 fell marginally. London's FTSE 100 and Frankfurt's DAX also declined fractionally. CAC 40 in Paris gained by over 0.5%. FTSE MIB also traded in the positive territory by posting 0.71% gain. Energy giant British Petroleum has reported a net loss of $6.7 billion for the second quarter of this year. It had earned a net profit of $2.8 million during the same period last year. The company said it has halved its dividend to 5.25 cents per share for this quarter. British Petroleum CEO Bernard Looney says the performance of the company has remained resilient, but exploration and impairment costs increased. BP incurred $9.2 billion for impairments and $1.7 billion for exploration write-offs. The company says the pandemic has prompted it to lower its oil and price forecasts through the 2050. Pakistan has announced its 16-man squad for the opening test match against England at the Old Trafford, Manchester on Wednesday. Azhar Ali will lead the side that also includes former skipper Sarfraz Ahmed. The squad also features limited overs captain Babar Azam, star bowler Mohammad Abbas and teenage sensation Naseem Shah. Wahab Riaz, Ashraf, Shaheen Shanwari and Imran Khan Jr. could not make it to the final squad. Earlier, Pakistan's coach Misbah-ul Haq said his team is mentally prepared to face a stern challenge posed by the And now the weather situation from Metro. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.